The night started like any other night with friends and family. Sarah and I had been hosting a party with my brother Alex and his wife Rachel in attendance. We were all laughing, drinking, and having a great time. The perfect evening among loved ones. "Hey bro, pass me another beer, would ya?" Alex slurred, his words starting to blend together after one too many drinks. I shook my head with a chuckle. "I think you've had enough for tonight, Alex. Why don't you switch to water for a bit?" He waved me off dismissively. "Nah, I'm good. Just living it up with my favorite people." Sarah came up beside me, looping her arm through mine. "Don't be such a party pooper, James. Let him have another if he wants." She shot me a playful wink before sauntering off to the kitchen. I watched her go, smiling to myself. 5 years of marriage, and she could still make my heart flutter like a schoolboy with a crush. When she disappeared from view, I turned back to Alex, who was now swaying unsteadily on his feet. "You know what? I'm cutting you off, bud. Let's get you some water and sobered up before Rachel kills me." Grumbling, Alex allowed me to lead him to the kitchen. Sarah was there, pouring herself another glass of wine. She looked up as we entered, a teasing grin playing on her lips. Lightweight can't handle his liquor? She took a deliberate sip, holding my gaze over the rim of her glass. I rolled my eyes good-naturedly. "He's had more than enough. I'm just trying to avoid a situation here. Relax, James." Sarah set her glass down and moved to put her hands on Alex's shoulders, steadying him. "I'll take good care of your brother while you go enjoy the party." Before I could protest, she had already begun ushering Alex from the room. I watched them go, an uneasy feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. But I shook it off. This was my wife and brother. What could possibly happen? Little did I know, that night would be the beginning of the end of my marriage. The next morning, I awoke with a pounding headache, but otherwise feeling refreshed after a good night's sleep. I stretched lazily before getting up to start the coffee maker, only to nearly jump out of my skin when I turned and saw Alex sitting at the kitchen table, looking ashen. "Oh my God, Alex. Give a guy some warning next time," I admonished, my heart still racing. When he didn't respond, didn't even look up, the uneasy feeling from the night before came creeping back. "Alex? You okay, man?" Finally, he lifted his haunted gaze to meet mine. "I did something terrible last night," he whispered, his voice cracking. I slept with Sarah." The words hung heavy in the air as the world stopped spinning. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to accurately describe the myriad of emotions that washed over me in that moment. Shock, anger, betrayal, disbelief. This had to be some kind of sick joke. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed, desperately wishing my voice didn't sound so shaky. Alex opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he just shook his head miserably, shame and regret etched into every line on his face. "Dude." I ran a shaking hand through my hair, trying to make sense of it all. "Please tell me this is some kind of messed up prank." Slowly, numbly, he shook his head again. "I'm so sorry, James. I was drunk and stupid and it just happened. One minute we were talking, the next—" He trailed off, seemingly unable to voice the details. "My own brother, with my wife. This couldn't be real. Why?" I finally choked out, barely recognizing my own voice. "Why would you do this to me?" Alex flinched as if I'd struck him. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't have an excuse. I betrayed you in the worst way. You're my brother, my best friend, and I screwed everything up. I'm so sorry." I stared at Alex in stunned silence, his words ringing in my ears like a death knell. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself think over the roaring in my head. "I'm so sorry," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. That single, pathetic apology was supposed to make up for this unforgivable betrayal? My hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at my sides. "Get out," I finally managed through gritted teeth. "I can't even look at you right now." Alex opened his mouth, confusion and hurt flickering across his face, but I cut him off with a shake of my head. "Just go, Alex, before I say or do something I can't take back." He hesitated a moment longer, then seemingly thought better of arguing. With a dejected nod, he rose to his feet and trudged out of the kitchen. I could hear his footsteps retreating, followed by the slam of the front door. Only then did I allow myself to crumple, sinking numbly into the nearest chair. My mind spun, replaying every happy memory of Sarah and me over our 5 years of marriage. How could she do this? And with Alex, of all people, my own flesh and blood? 1,000 questions swirled through my brain, each more agonizing than the last. Eventually, I heard movement upstairs. Sarah must have woken up. I steeled myself, unsure whether I wanted to confront her or simply avoid her entirely. Before I could decide, she appeared in the kitchen doorway, still dressed in the short black dress from the night before. Her hair was mussed and her makeup smeared, clear evidence of what she'd done. "Morning, babe," she greeted cheerfully. "Don't we have some day drinking to do, or—" She broke off as she actually looked at me, seeming to register the fury in my eyes for the first time. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "James? What's wrong?" The words burst from me before I could censor them. "Your brother-in-law just confessed to sleeping with you last night." Sarah froze, her face paling rapidly under her already smeared makeup. For a long moment, she said nothing, seemingly unable to formulate a response. "Well?" I finally prompted. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Her shock melted away, replaced by a look of cool indifference that shot through me like a bolt of ice water. She shrugged one shoulder nonchalantly. "What do you want me to say, James? It happened." Another shrug. "I'm not going to apologize." If possible, her words made my blood boil even hotter. I shot to my feet, the chair clattering to the floor behind me. You're not even going to deny it?" I sputtered incredulously. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Relax," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's not that big of a deal." Not that big of a deal? The words sliced into me like shards of glass. How could she stand there so casually, so unaffected, when she just shattered my entire world into pieces? "Get out," I heard myself say, the demand coming out as more of a growl. Sarah's eyes widened in mock innocence. "What? Jamie, baby, come on." "No," I roared, slamming my fist onto the counter. Dishes jumped and rattled from the force. "Get your things and get the hell out of my house. Our marriage is over. Do you understand?" She blinked at me, seemingly taken aback by my outburst for the first time. For a moment, I dared to hope I'd finally gotten through to her, that she would apologize, break down, show some semblance of remorse. But she simply tossed her hair over her shoulder and sneered, "Whatever. You can't control me, James. I did what I wanted, and I don't regret it." My heart shattered into a million pieces as the full weight of her callousness hit me. This was the woman I had loved, had planned to spend my life with, and she didn't care. Not about me, not about our marriage. It had all been a lie. I opened my mouth, hundreds of vitriolic words bubbling up on my tongue. But in the end, I could only manage to get out. Sarah looked as if she might argue further, but seeming to think better of it, she simply shrugged again and brushed past me, heading for the stairs to pack her things. I watched her go numbly, unable to fully process the reality of what was happening. My life as I knew it was over, crumbling to ashes around me. And for what? A drunken one-night stand with someone who was supposed to be family? The injustice, the raw pain of it all welled up inside me until I thought I might suffocate. I had to get out. Grabbing my keys, I stormed out the front door, no particular destination in mind. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house a moment longer with the stench of Sarah's betrayal lingering. As I drove aimlessly, my phone began ringing incessantly. A glance at the screen revealed the caller as Alex, no doubt hoping to plead his case further. I ignored the first few calls until they reached double digits. Finally, seething, I pulled over and answered with a terse, "What?" "Dude, we need to talk." Alex's panicked voice came through the line. "I told Rachel everything and now she's saying she wants a divorce." My knuckles went white around the steering wheel at the mere sound of his voice. He had the audacity to reach out to me with his problems after what he'd done? "That's rich, coming from you," I said with a mirthless chuckle. "Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences, Alex? That you could just swoop in, destroy my life, and walk away scot-free?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Alex spoke again, His voice was low and heavy. I don't have any excuse, James. I screwed up in the worst way, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But you're still my brother and I need you right now, man. My jaw clenched hard enough to grind molars into dust. A massive part of me wanted to simply hang up, to cut him out of my life as surely as I'd cut Sarah out. How dare he try to beg for forgiveness? But another, smaller part of me, the part that remembered years of brotherhood, of having each other's backs through every high and low, wouldn't let me shut him out entirely. Not yet. I took a deep, shuddering breath, struggling to find my center. For once in your life, be a man and take responsibility for your own actions, I said at last, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Tell Rachel the whole truth, every ugly detail. And once you've done that, then we'll see if I can even stand the sight of you. There was a long pause on the other end of the line as my words sunk in. I could practically sense Alex's hesitation, his instinct to beg and plead for an easier path. But to his credit, he seemed to recognize how futile that would be. You're right, he said at last, his voice subdued. I'll tell her everything, the full truth, no matter how ugly. It's the least I can do. I said nothing, suddenly weary down to my bones. What else was there to say? He had made his bed through his own inexcusable actions. Now he had to lie in it. I really am sorry, James, Alex went on quietly. I don't expect you to forgive me anytime soon. Hell, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself. But you're still my brother, and I hope someday we can find a way to move past this. The word struck an unexpected chord deep within me. Despite my blinding rage, my aching sense of betrayal, there was still a part of me that cared for Alex, that remembered all the years of having his back, of being there for one another through thick and thin. But that part seemed so small, so faint compared to the roiling torrent of pain and anger drowning my senses. I was in no condition to make any promises of reconciliation. Just take care of your own mess first, I said gruffly. Then we'll see where we stand. Alex mumbled something akin to agreement, and we ended the call on an awkward, strained note. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, resting my head against the steering wheel for a long moment. I'm not sure how long I sat there, letting the weight of it all crush down on me like a vice. Before I knew it, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood streets. Only then did I finally pull myself together and head for home, dreading having to face Sarah again. But when I arrived, the house stood dark and silent, Sarah's car noticeably absent from the driveway. She had taken me at my word and cleared out, it seemed. Good. I wasn't in the frame of mind to argue or fight any longer. The following days passed in a blur of misery. As the fog slowly began to lift, anger and indignation took its place. How dare Sarah play the victim after so heinously betraying me? Suddenly, the mere thought of her spiteful smirk as she refused to apologize had my blood boiling all over again. It was around that time that the bombshell dropped. A special report aired on the local news channel, featuring Sarah in all her lying, manipulative glory. There she was on screen, eyes rimmed with carefully applied makeup to appear red from crying, sobbing out a tragic story of spousal abuse at my hands. How I was a drunken, abusive monster who had kicked her out with nowhere to go after discovering her innocent indiscretion with Alex. I watched in stunned, impotent fury as my own wife, the person who was supposed to love and cherish me above all others, expertly twisted the story to paint herself as the victim and me as the cruelest of villains. I couldn't believe the audacity, the sheer malice required to concoct such vicious lies. For several long moments after the segment ended, I could only sit and fume, vibrating with scarcely contained rage. How dare she do this? How dare she try to turn the court of public opinion against me after admitting to her betrayal openly? But as my anger settled into a cold, hard resolve, a new sense of determination began to well up within me. If Sarah wanted to wage war in the court of public opinion, then so be it. I would simply have to hit back twice as hard with the one thing she didn't have on her side: the truth. I immediately set up a meeting with Sarah under the guise of trying to reconcile. If she thought she could humble me with her lies on television, I would use her own arrogance to catch her in a trap of my own making. We met at a nondescript coffee shop downtown a few days later. I had to resist the urge to sneer as Sarah breezed and looking impeccable and put together, as if she didn't have a care in the world. She really was an accomplished actress when it came to deception. "Hey, babe," she greeted airily as she slid into the booth across from me. "I was so relieved when you agreed to meet up. I was worried you wouldn't want to talk after, well, you know." A perfectly crafted look of remorse crossed her features, but I could see the smugness lingering in her eyes. She thought she had already won. "Let's dispense with the phony apologies, Sarah," I said coldly. "I saw your performance on the news recently. Can't say I'm impressed with your storytelling abilities." She blinked owlishly, the mask slipping for just a moment to reveal genuine surprise. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to cut right to the chase. But she rallied quickly, crossing her arms over her chest with a huff. "It's the truth, James. I don't know why you're mad. I would have thought you'd be relieved I was finally able to escape your abuse." "Save it," I snapped, leaning forward to glare at her intently. "We both know that's a load of crap. Everything, from start to finish, has been one big manipulation on your part. You cheated on me, admitted to it without remorse, and then cried victim when I wouldn't take you back. But what you didn't count on, James, you fool, you were nothing but an ATM for me. A dumb man who pays my bills. What I did with your brother was nothing. I slept with multiple men under your nose, and there is nothing you can do about it." Her words hit me like a bullet. "What the hell, Sarah? With multiple men? I can't believe what have you just said." "Yes, honey, and there is only one thing left to do, is to take your wealth and divorce. After that I'll be done with you. I will not face defeat from you, Sarah, and definitely not after you confessed sleeping with multiple men." With tremendous satisfaction, I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us, making sure she could see the voice recording app pulled up. "Is that I managed to get your whole confession right here? Every dirty detail, in your own words." Sarah's defiant expression crumbled as quickly as it had appeared, melting into one of naked panic. She gaped soundlessly at the phone for one beat, then two. Then, without warning, she launched herself across the table, clawing viciously toward the device. "You lying son of a—" But I was ready for her. Surging backwards to avoid her grasping hands, I snatched up the phone and showed her the second recording app already running, capturing her outburst in pristine quality. "Don't bother, Sarah," I growled as she froze mid-lunge, eyes wide with the realization that she was caught. "I had a feeling you might try something like this, so I set up a backup in case you went for my phone. Your deranged attempt to steal evidence is already preserved." Slowly, as if in a stupor, Sarah sank back into her seat, looking utterly defeated. In that moment, with all her cards on the table, she seemed to age 10 years right before my eyes. I realized with a jolt of grim satisfaction that her well of deception had finally run dry. We sat in tense silence for several beats, sizing one another up through new lenses. On my end, any remaining shred of love or admiration for the woman across from me had been utterly incinerated by the grotesque reality of how deep her deceit ran. She was nothing more than a manipulative stranger to me now, and I felt nothing but revulsion and pity. Finally, Sarah seemed to find her words again, her hands twisting agitatedly in her lap. "So what now?" she demanded, a last flicker of bravado in her tone. "You've got your little recordings. Are you going to try blackmailing me? Because I've got enough." "Save it," I cut her off, stabbing a finger in her direction. "I don't want a damn thing from you except for you to stay as far away from me as possible. You lost the right to anything of mine the second you cheated and then lied about it." Her lips pressed into a thin, indignant line, but she seemed to realize arguing would be futile. My evidence had acted like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing the flames of her schemes and leaving her well and truly cornered. "Fine," she spat, sliding stiffly from the booth and snatching her purse up with jerky movements. "Keep everything, James. I want nothing from a sad, pathetic loser like you anyway." I simply shrugged, unaffected by her petulant attempt to wound me with words. "Don't worry, Sarah. I have more than enough self-respect left to not want a thing from you either." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she seemed to realize any further argument would be pointless. With one last scathing look, She whirled on her heel and stormed out of the coffee shop. I watched her dramatic exit impassively until the door swung shut behind her. In the ensuing silence, I could scarcely believe what had just transpired. It was finally, irrevocably over with Sarah. The lies, the manipulation, the toxicity. Part of me had hoped she would show an ounce of remorse once confronted with undeniable proof, but her actions spoke louder than words. She simply didn't have it in her. Still, it was a bittersweet sort of victory to close that chapter of my life forever. My first order of business was handling the divorce proceedings. I retained a no-nonsense lawyer who listened impassively as I laid out the entire sordid tale, playing back the recordings of Sarah's confession and evidence tampering attempt. By the time I had finished, the look on his face told me he shared my sense of disgust over her actions. With proof like this, she won't be able to contest much, he stated grimly. We should be able to secure a ruling overwhelmingly in your favor in no time at all. I'll make sure she doesn't see a penny of your assets. True to his word, the divorce case was mercifully open and shut. When we appeared before the judge and I played back the recordings, his expression quickly shifted from skepticism to abject horror at Sarah's schemes and abject lack of remorse. In no uncertain terms, he ruled entirely in my favor. She would receive nothing in the divorce but the clothes on her back. Every asset, property, and fund was declared solely mine. As much as it stung to untangle her so completely from my life, I couldn't deny the petty thrill of satisfaction as her look of shock and outrage echoed through the courtroom. But I wasn't done exposing her deceit yet. With a copy of the recordings in hand, I marched straight to the local news station that had initially aired her slanderous interview and demanded a retraction. The manager I spoke to was highly skeptical at first, falling back on tired cries of freedom of speech and journalistic integrity. But one look at the damning recordings changed his tune quick. Faced with indisputable evidence of defamation and slander, he quickly agreed to pull Sarah's baseless interview from their archives and website. With her lies debunked in a very public manner, I could have chosen to slink off and start putting the ugliness behind me. But Sarah had been so insistent on dragging her manipulations into the spotlight, I felt compelled to shine the brightest light possible directly onto the truth. Which is why, a few weeks later, I found myself sitting in the studio of that same news station, cameras fixed on me as the interviewer explained the highly unusual circumstances to the viewers at home. Sarah's unfounded interview accusing me of being an abuser and cheater had been uncovered as complete fabrication, and I was there to finally share the reality she had tried so hard to obscure. I laid it all bare: her affair with my brother, my initial horror and heartache over her betrayal, the lengths she went to twist the tale into her favor and decry me as the villain on public television. And then, finally, I played back the recordings that spelled out her depravity in her own smug, remorseless voice. To say the anchor and audience were shocked would be a vast understatement. A heavy silence lingered in the studio as the recordings finished playing back the truth in harsh clarity. I could see a smattering of people in the crowd shaking their heads slowly, others whispering between themselves in disbelief over Sarah's cruelty. When the anchor finally found her words again, the first thing she could manage was, "Mr. Patterson, I am so terribly sorry you had to go through such an awful ordeal. Thank you for coming forward to clear your name and expose the truth." I acknowledged her sentiments with a solemn nod, searching her eyes to gauge the genuine contrition I saw reflected there. Her team had unwittingly been exploited by Sarah's lies, made party to defaming an innocent man on public television. While I had my vengeance in the retractions, she would have to grapple with the hit to her and her station's credibility. With nothing left to say on the matter, I excused myself from the studio and stepped out into the cool evening air, letting out a long, slow breath. Against all odds, I had survived the crucible of Sarah's treachery and deceit. It had very nearly destroyed me, leaving scars that would likely never fully heal. But I had persevered and, in the end, emerged victorious through sheer tenacity. I was free and clear, my name unblemished, while Sarah's malicious machinations had been laid bare for all to see. A strong sense of vindication settled over me, coupled with the first blossoms of hope that I could begin building a new life from the ashes of the old. In the days that followed, I found myself drifting back to reconnect with Alex and Rachel. After all, their upheaval had been every bit as tumultuous as mine, if not more so. I extended an olive branch by sharing the full recordings with Rachel, laying Sarah's truth at her feet. To her immense credit, she listened to every vile second with a stoic expression, showing no outward emotion until the vile playback clicked to a stop. "Thank you for this, James," she said at last, her voice low and somber. "I can't even begin to understand the pain you've endured, but at least now I know the truth about what happened to Alex. That he didn't willingly betray me, but was simply a victim of Sarah's manipulation as well." Rachel's quiet understanding calmed something inside me that had still been storming. She was absolutely right. Whatever obscene actions Alex had been party to, he had by no means been the driving force behind them. Sarah had schemed and seduced, exploiting the immaturity of a drunken moment to selfishly blow both of our lives apart. Sensing my change in perspective, Rachel moved to grip my hand firmly. "We're going to work on rebuilding our marriage," she said, her voice strengthening with resolve. "It won't be easy after what happened, but I know Alex loves me, and I him. We have to find a way to get past this, for our family." I could only nod, squeezing her hand back as I regarded her with a renewed surge of respect. She had every right to walk away, to cut Alex out of her life as thoroughly as I had cut Sarah from mine. But she was choosing the high road, healing, rebuilding, and persisting against overwhelming odds. It was admirable beyond words. "For whatever it's worth," I said gruffly, "I'm rooting for you two to make it. You're already miles ahead of Sarah simply by choosing to keep working at it, instead of taking the easy route of running away." A faint, grateful smile tugged at the corner of Rachel's mouth. She seemed to take strength from my sentiment, and I made a silent vow to try and be there as support for them both in whatever small way I could. They deserved whatever little solace I could offer after the turmoil they had endured. As for Sarah, she had been resoundingly defeated and shamed on all fronts. By the time the dust had settled, she had lost everything: my trust, my assets, whatever scraps of reputation she might have clung to were incinerated by the truth. The lies and cruelty she had bet everything on had not only failed to destroy me, but had blown back in spectacular fashion to ruin her. Finally, I was free from Sarah's lies and betrayals. Now, it's time to get back to work and focus on my mental and physical health. After all this, I really need happiness back in my life, and I hope I'll be happy in the future. With that, the dark chapter of Sarah was over for my life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.